ever worked in any kind of office job, you'll know that admin is, for the most part, pretty dull. Whether it's filing paperwork, reviewing applications, or following the same process over and over again, it can be quite tedious, especially if it's the only thing you're doing all day and you don't have any fun colleagues to spice things up a bit. You'd think, therefore, that video games that task players with these sort of things would go down like a lead balloon. And yet there's something about them that draws in audiences in their thousands. For this list, we're looking at games that set players to work in jobs that, from an outsider perspective, might seem a little bit boring. They might task players with reviewing documents, balancing books, or deciding the fate of an individual based on their paperwork. Regardless of their specific gameplay mechanics though, they're all titles that seem like they would be quite dull, but are actually quite entertaining in a bureaucratic sort of way. I'm Ashton from Triple Jump, and here are 10 video games that make admin fun. Number 10, Field Hospital, Dr. Taylor's Story. If you dream of being a doctor but feel like all that studying would get in the way of your roaring social life, then Field Hospital Dr. Taylor's Story might just be for you. The game is a short point-and-click title that sends players into an active war zone to decide which players to treat and which to refuse. Players will need to carefully study the information presented to them in order to ensure that the right people are getting the care they need, and face the consequences of treating the wrong ones. Naturally, not every choice will be as straightforward as who is the most injured, so players will need to make some very tough decisions along the way. The ending they get will all depend on what they choose to do throughout the game. In addition to this, players also need to keep an eye out for clues that will help them piece the overarching narrative together. Every character has a story, so it pays to read all their files extremely carefully. Field Hospital Dr. Taylor's Story probably won't take up more than an hour of your time, but it's a hugely engaging and morally taxing hour that you'll be glad you took the time to experience. Number 9, St. Orchin's Orphanage. Anyone who goes into St. Orchin's Orphanage thinking they're going to have a nice time changing the lives of a bunch of unfortunate kiddos is going to be in for a rude awakening when they actually boot up the game. Yes, it's a management sim during which players must run an orphanage, however it's also set during the war and the kids are being trained as soldiers. St. Orchin's Orphanage presents players with the usual challenges of running a business, i.e. ensuring the money coming in is at least equal to the money going out, but it also adds a variety of emotional blows thanks to its subject matter. Players must decide which children to put through the military training to support the war effort and which ones to put to work, either in the mines, sweeping chimneys, delivering papers, or in sweatshops. Each of these jobs comes with a risk of injury or disease, but they also generate income for the orphanage. None of the options for the children is a pleasant one, so you're going to have to make peace with your horrible decisions early on. So off you go down the mines, little Timmy. Remember, it's for the greater good. Number 8, Peace, Death. Most people have ideas about what happens to us when we die, whether you believe in an afterlife, reincarnation, or just eternal darkness. If there is a many-tiered afterlife, however, then it follows that there is some sort of organisation responsible for ensuring that the right people go to the right places. The 2017 title Peace, Death puts players into the role of a reaper working at Apocalypse Inc. It's their job to analyse those who have died and determine whether they should go to heaven, purgatory, or hell. The good folks get to spend their eternity in paradise, and the bad ones get to roast until the end of time. Things aren't always as simple as they might seem though, as clients will do their darndest to sneak their way into heaven, whether they deserve to be there or not. Is that guy wearing a hat because he's having a bad hair day, or is he actually a demon trying to hide a pair of horns? You'd better check it out or you'll be stuck facing the consequences. Peace, Death isn't a particularly long game, taking most players just a few hours to complete, but considering it allows you to judge other people, and who doesn't love doing that, for the cost of a cup of coffee, we'd say it's well worth checking out. Number 7, Please Don't Touch Anything. If you've ever been roped into covering the desk of a colleague while they've popped off on break, you'll know just how tempting it is to have a little snoop around. Please Don't Touch Anything from developer 4 Quarters takes this feeling and turns it into a video game. When your colleague nips to the bathroom, they leave you in charge of their desk with just one simple instruction: don't touch anything. You're the respectful sort, so you wouldn't do that, right? Though, That big red button does look mighty tempting. I wonder what would happen if you pushed it. Probably nothing bad, right? As the game unfolds, players are presented with additional buttons, switches, and tools, amongst other things, and must use the clues they receive in order to figure out what they need to do next. Some of the riddles can be on the obtuse side, but it's nothing that little out-of-the-box thinking can't overcome. There are plenty of brain teasers to keep even the smartest cookies amongst you entertained for an hour or so, and 25 different endings to discover, meaning plenty of replayability. Oh, hi, James! Now, I know you said not to touch anything on your desk, but I just couldn't resist pressing that big red button. What do you mean that causes the channel to self-destruct? Number 6, not for broadcast. There really is some tripe on TV these days, and it feels like for every Peaky Blinders, there's about 1,000 Love Islands. And I, for one, am sick of it. I should start my own TV channel. Yeah, that'll learn 'em. If you fancy experiencing all the fun of running a TV station for yourself, then you should take a crack at Not for Broadcast, a simulation title developed by British studio Not Games that finally got a full release in 2022 after spending a little under 2 years in early access. Protagonist Alex Winston works in the production control room of the National Nightly News, a show broadcast in a fictional dystopia that looks an awful lot like Great Britain. Alex must choose which camera feeds to use, censor naughty language, and ensure that the broadcast goes ahead uninterrupted. The player also gets to choose whether they side with the oppressive government or the resistant group that opposes them. What they do throughout the game ultimately influences which of the 14 endings they get. Are you going to keep your head down and do what the government asks, or are you going to stick your neck out and risk yourself for the cause? The power is yours to wield as you see fit. Number 5, Return of the Obra Dinn. Though we've never actually done the job ourselves, we can't imagine that being an insurance inspector is particularly fun, especially if you were an insurance inspector in the 1800s. Not only is your job dull, but you can't even come home after a long day and watch Netflix. Nightmare! Somehow though, indie developer Lucas Pope has managed to turn this slightly boring job into an engaging video game with his 2018 title, Return of the Obra Dinn. The good ship Obra Dinn goes missing at sea with 60 people aboard. 5 years later, it reappears off the coast of England, though none of the passengers or crew have lived to tell the tale of what happened. As an insurance inspector for the East India Company, it's the player's job to find clues aboard the ship and figure out exactly what the heck has gone down. To assist with this, they're given a device called the Memento Mortem, which allows them to hear the seconds before a person's death and explore the exact moment that they died. Players will need to have all their wits about them if they've any hope of unravelling the mystery. Insurance claims have never been so exciting. Number 4, bureaucracy. If you've ever had to contact your bank or other such institution to tell them you've moved house, you'll know what a frustrating experience it can be. I'm sorry, you'll need to do that at the local branch. It's only open from 11:15 to 11:23 on a Wednesday. Anyone who has gone through that pain will surely appreciate Bureaucracy, the 1987 text-based adventure written by legendary sci-fi author Douglas Adams. When their mail is being delivered to the wrong address and they find themselves unable to access their bank accounts, the player is forced to embark on a journey of red tape and vexation as they try and sort out the whole sorry mess. Throughout their quest, they'll encounter a bunch of wacky and unhelpful characters whose sole purpose seems to be one of hindrance. Whilst trying to resolve their various problems, the player character's blood pressure can go up or down depending on their actions, and if they let it get too high, they'll suffer a fatal aneurysm. The game is hugely silly and players are sure to have a great time with Adam's trademark sense of humour. It will take you back to that awful afternoon spent on the phone with your gas company though. Just keep an eye out on your blood pressure, yeah? Number 3, the Republia Times. Here in the UK, we're lucky enough to have freedom of the press, which means that for better or for worse, journalists have pretty much free reign over what they publish. They can, of course, print things that make the government look good, but they're also free to call them a bunch of plops peddling toe rags if they so wish. Sadly, not everywhere grants its journalists the same freedoms, and many news outlets around the world have their content dictated to them by their respective governments. This practice is explored in the Republia Times, another game from American indie developer Lucas Pope. The player steps into the shoes of a newspaper editor in the fictional authoritarian country of Republia and must carefully choose what stories to print every day. Players must print plenty of pro-government material to help convince Joe Public that oppression is good, but not so much that no one wants to read the paper anymore. Oh, and did we mention that if you don't get it right, the government will murder your wife and kids? We probably should have led with that one, to be honest. As simple as the gameplay is, the Republic at times is awfully engaging. It's also browser-based and free to play, so if you do feel like stepping into the shoes of an oppressed newspaper editor, it won't cost you a penny. Number 2, death and taxes. Have you ever taken a moment to think about death? I have. And I'm often left wondering if there's some sort of higher power out there determining who lives and who dies. Obviously, there's no way of really knowing, but it's an interesting concept to consider. Clearly, it's something that developer Lene Kunap have been thinking about when they decided to create Death and Taxes, a game which tasks players to decide who gets to live and who must die. The game begins on the player's first day in their new job as a sort of Grim Reaper. Their boss, Fate, sits them down and explains the rules. Each day they receive information on a number of people, and based on that day's requirements, they'll choose whether to kill or spare their subjects. Naturally, things get trickier as time goes on, and players will need to make some tough choices in order to keep the world in balance or face the consequences. Alongside an interesting premise, the game is filled to the brim with dark humour, so whilst you are ultimately choosing human beings with lives, dreams and loved ones to kill, at least you can have a bit of a chuckle while you're doing it. And number 1, Papers, Please. No offence to anyone who does it for a living, but working in border control doesn't seem like it's a lot of fun. Checking the credentials of people coming into the country is, of course, important, and we salute anyone with the patience to do it, but it doesn't seem like a very good time. With all of that said, playing Papers, Please isn't really a good time either. The game is hugely engrossing, but it weaves a gripping story of life in an oppressive regime, so you might walk away feeling a bit blue. We still recommend it regardless, but just prepare for all the paperwork to hit you right in the feels. Players take on the role of a border control officer in the fictional country of Ostotska. The pay is terrible and the work is dull, but hey, it's a job, right? Things start out fairly simple. Just check the documents, and if they meet the requirements set by higher ups, in they go. If not, it's a no from Ostotska, my friend. It's not long before the game starts testing your morals though, and you're forced to choose whether to follow the rules or rebel against the state, potentially putting your earnings at risk. Start a revolution or get Granny her medicine. I'm gonna have to sleep on that one, I think.